For more on this, let's bring in Saleem Ali from the University of Delaware. He's their Blue and Gold Distinguished Professor of Energy and the Environment. Saleem, thanks so much for joining us. Following what's happening in Venice, a lot of talk about carbon pricing. How does it work? Who's for it and who's against it?
Yes, thank you, Roee. For carbon pricing to work, one has to consider, first of all, what is the willingness to pay for the product that is being priced. And it's important to keep in mind that carbon pricing in the past has not been particularly effective in, for example, incentivizing the use of solar or wind technologies. The most effective measures have been very clear outright regulations which have encouraged or facilitated those. However, pricing can be an effective tool in leveling the playing field. So, for example, with high carbon intensive technologies, for example, shale oil extraction, if you price carbon there, you're going to level the playing field in case that kind of energy is very cheap for utilities to buy. So carbon pricing plays a partial role, but it is by no means sufficient to incentivize a green transition.
Yeah, this is essentially taxation and carbon credits. Is this the most effective way to deal with climate change? I mean, it doesn't address, for example, growing per capita consumption and its impact on the environment.
Yes, exactly. So, there are different ways of implementing a carbon tax, and there are different ways of using the pricing mechanism. We have this mechanism called cap and trade, where you basically set some target for what are allowable emissions, and then you allow polluters to trade with those who might have credits for having cleaner industries. So that has an incentive to at least minimize the amount of emissions up to a certain point, but it doesn't necessarily lead us to more accelerated targets, which is what we need currently in terms of meeting some of the most drastic predictions around climate change. So pricing is certainly a tool, but it's important that it's not considered as the key measure by which we reach climate mitigation.
Activists say not enough action has been taken since the Paris climate deal. Do you agree?
Absolutely. The Paris climate agreement itself has been fairly measured in its ambitions. If we are going to really try and meet the scientifically predicted targets for reducing emissions in order to mitigate the kind of sea level rise predictions, for example, you have to do much more. And it's becoming increasingly clear that we will need to invest in adaptation, that mitigation is not going to be adequate. And the G20 countries have to prepare for climate adaptation, for things like what is called managed retreat. For example, so many of the G20 countries have coastal settlements. Certainly China has so much of its population on the coast. There will need to be major investments of climate finance around adaptation to move communities more inland, because the most imminent threat is going to be from sea level rise, which is very much clear and evident that's happening because polar ice melting is taking place, whether or not it's anthropogenic, or however you deem it, it's just happening. It's empirically observable.
Saleem Ali from the University of Delaware, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your insight.
Thank you.